Rafi G over at Torah Thoughts. Here's a link to it. There's a good post in which he asks a series of questions about the incident in which Noach gets drunk. And I'd like to address some of those questions, provide a couple of possible answers. So first let me just summarize his post. He mentions that it says a whole bunch of times that Cham was the father of Canaan. And Rashi explains that it's telling us now because we only have Toldos, Shem, Cham, V'Yafet later on, and we wouldn't know Canaan. So if we're going to be cursing Canaan, if Noach is going to be giving a curse to Canaan, which happens in this instance, we have to know about who Canaan is. So that's why it says that Cham Abi Canaan. Now, also he cites Rashi that why punish Canaan? Because one of the things that one of the accounts of what exactly Cham did was that he either sodomized or castrated Noach, according to two different midrashim. So by Cham defiling Noach, he prevented him from having a fourth child, and so he punished / cursed the fourth child of Cham. That's again a citation of a Rashi. So now are the questions. Why not punish Cham directly? He writes, at least in addition to punishing Canaan didn't do anything, so Cham should at least get part of the punishment, if not the bulk of it. So in terms of that, I would just point out two possibilities. The first possibility is that if you look at this is a curse. It's not assigning Canaan from now on you're going to be a slave to your brothers and you're going to actually have to be there. This is a curse, just like you have brachot and kolot that apply to generations to come. So when the curse is saying when the curse is attacking Canaan, it says Vayomer Arur Canaan Eved Avadim Yihiel Achav. It's not talking about Canaan the person. It's talking about Canaan the people, which means Canaan's descendants. And so we're not actually punishing Canaan himself even. It's a general curse that applies to all of his descendants. And so if so, you can't really ask that kind of question in terms of Cham. Why shouldn't Cham get at least part of the punishment, if not the bulk of it? He is, because Cham's descendants, or at least the last of his descendants, was Canaan. And so by cursing Canaan, he's actually also cursing Cham, or actually specific ones of his descendants. Another possible answer to this, which isn't in accordance with Rashi, but would be in accordance with Ibn Ezra. If you look, and in fact this kind of assumes, or it gives an answer to one of the later questions that Rafi G asked in his post. Namely, if you look at the pasuk, it says, Vayikat Noach miyeno, Vayida es asher asalo b'no hakatan. And who's b'no hakatan? And Rafi G asks that later, that it's every single time he says, he mentions Canaan, every time he mentions Cham, he also mentions Canaan. So, except in this one time, it doesn't even mention Cham, it just says B'no HaKatan. So, you could ask another question, which kind of answers this first question, in that the sons of Noach are Shem, Cham, and Yafet. And Cham seems to be the middle son, at least in the way that it's being listed. So, if so, how come he's B'no HaKatan? It's possible that the genealogies, the lists of the sons aren't in order. It's possible that they're listed based on some other type of reckoning. And if so, then B'no HaKatan can't apply to Cham. However, Ibn Ezra, on the basis of the fact that it says B'no HaKatan, says who is the B'no HaKatan? It's Canaan. Because if you look at the later list of descendants of Cham, his last son, his fourth son, is Canaan. And so he says that some incident happened in which Canaan did something, and it wasn't Ham that did something. Ham just didn't cover his father, but Canaan actually did some kind of act which isn't mentioned explicitly in the verse over here, and so that's why we're specifically cursing Canaan. Again, this is an answer according to Ibn Ezra. It wouldn't be an answer according to Rashi's reading of this. But the first answer, why not punishing Ham directly, is that the answer is that we're punishing descendants in any case, and so that would possibly be an answer. Rafi G continues. Also, throughout this section, he writes, throughout this section of the parshat, it never mentions Ham on his own. It always is Ham, the father of Canaan. It would have been enough for Rashi's lesson just to say it once. But it says it a couple of times, then Noach curses only Canaan, and even when it happens, it doesn't say Ham's name, but it says Noach realized what his youngest son had did. Why is Ham absolved of all responsibility for his actions? I don't think it's really trying to absolve Ham of all responsibility. The question is, how come in all of these cases it says that Ham is Avi Canaan? Now, Rafi G actually gives a suggestion that because Canaan was his favorite son and they had a strong bond, by punishing Canaan it was destroying Ham as well, which would be an answer to many of the questions that he gave above. But as an attempt to answer this question, how come every single time it says that Ham was Avi Canaan, and what exactly, for Rashi's lesson, it would have been good enough if it said it once. So, in fact, it says that Ham was Avi Canaan twice. The first time is the very introduction to the story. It says in Perek Tes Pasuk Yud Ches, Vayehiru b'nei Noach hayotzim min hateva Shem v'cham v'yafes v'cham hu Avi Canaan. And this is actually the pasuk on which Rashi says his statement. And this is a genealogy type of statement, and as I've talked about in the past, when you have these genealogy sections, act as a framework, you have the macro scale and the micro scale where you zoom in to specific events. But you also have this macro scale about what's happening with the progression of the generations that forms a type of framework. And in general, within this macro genealogical section, it tries to introduce characters that we would need to know about because they're mentioned in the story. Because if all of a sudden you have a curse to Canaan and you don't know who Canaan is and where it's coming from, so you're going to put that in here, and part of the answer, why it says it twice. Here it's in Pasuk Yud Ches v'cham hu Avi Canaan, and then a little bit later it's one second. Right, it's in Pasuk Chaf Beis. It says Vayar Ham Avi Canaan es ervas aviv vayaged l'shnei achav b'chutz. So again, when it mentions Ham, it says Ham Avi Canaan. So how come it says it there? So again, you could say that this is part of the actual incident. So within the incident, we're mentioning that Ham is Avi Canaan, so that the curse takes place. And then once we're also making this general framework to wrap around each of these stories, so we might also put that there to mention it within this macro scale. So that's a possible answer to it. But in fact, for each of these two times, you have midrashim that answer how come it says Cham Avi Canaan or V'cham hu Avi Canaan. One is a somewhat famous midrash. It's one of these lucky midrashim that people know, or at least I know about. But I would say that it's a pretty famous midrash. That in general, people on the Teva separated from their wives, and there was some animals that didn't keep with this commandment to separate, and there was also one of Noach's sons who didn't separate from his wife. And that's why it says, Vayu b'nei Noach yotzim min hateva she'im v'cham b'yapes. V'cham hu abi Canaan is implying that when he was yotzim min hateva, cham hu abi Canaan. So that would be possibly an answer of why it says it in Pasuk Yud Ches. I don't think Rashi says this here. He might mention this midrash in some other location. The second place, on Pasuk Chaf Days, where it says, Vayar Sham Avi Canaan es Ervas Avei Yev L'Shnei Achav B'chutz. So you could once again you could cite a midrash on this, and in fact Rashi does cite a midrash on this, citing a gracious Rabbah, that it says, Yeshmei Rabboseinu Amrim Canaan Ra'av Higidlach L'Aviv L'Kach Huzkar Al Hadavar V'Niskalkal. The reason why it's mentioned here is that it's hinting at an earlier stage in which Canaan was originally Vayar Canaan es Ervas Avi Aviv, Vayaged L'Aviv, in other words, Vayev Canaan, and then Vayacham Avi Canaan es Ervas Vayev L'Shnei Achav B'chutz. So Rashi himself gives us something of an answer to